Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Alhamdulillah, all praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. And we send complete blessings and salutations upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And we send blessings upon his household and his companions. For indeed they struggled, they worked hard, they sacrificed, and they gave their lives so that the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam could be preserved and presented to us in such a manner that we take benefit from it today in this house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My respected elders, brothers, mothers and sisters in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set a certain amount of duties or obligations upon us that we have to fulfill as Muslimin. However, those are our responsibilities to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have to fulfill them. There is no two ways about it. So when it comes to performing our salah, or fasting in the month of Ramadan, or giving zakah, or going for hajj if we have the ability, these are things that we have to do as Muslimin, and it is part of Islam. And if we were not to do those things, we have to make up for it. Now, how do we gain closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how do we achieve or attain the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We have to understand as Muslimin, if we were to perform our 5 salawat regularly in the masjid, we fast in the month of Ramadan, we give our zakah, these things are just the basic minimum or the bare minimum. This is something we have to do. Every single Muslim has to do these things. This is not something extra or something optional that we're doing, or we think that we've achieved something really great. No, this is the bare minimum that we can do. So if we want to achieve the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if we want to gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what do we need to do so that we can get this pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we can be declared by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as one of those whom He loves? In a hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He loves someone, He calls out to Jibreel alayhi salatu wa salam, and He says, "Oh Jibreel, I love such and such a person, so love him." And then Jibreel alayhi salatu wa salam, he would call to the angels in the skies, and he would declare and say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has informed me that He loves such and such a person, and I love such and such a person. So you, O people, O angels of the heavens, the skies, you also love this person. So much so that all the angels in the heavens, they love this person. And that love is then felt by that person on earth. So when we do actions to gain the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will indeed reward us for it. So from amongst the actions that we can do to gain the pleasure and the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is first and foremost to complete our obligation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever responsibilities we have as Muslimin, we have to fulfill these things. When we declare La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, we are taking the declaration that we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we believe that there is no one worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we make that declaration, everything is included within that. That means we have to behave in a manner that is according to a Muslim. So we take the perfect example, which is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So when we speak in a manner that is acceptable for a Muslim. When we conduct our business, we conduct it in a manner that is acceptable for a Muslim. We look at the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and we follow his teachings. And we go according to the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. So we don't cheat, we don't deceive, we don't lie, we don't be dishonest. And we don't cause anyone any difficulty when we are trading or working with them. And at the same time, we are good to our families. These are things that come within the declaration of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So these are things that we have to understand, that just because you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you believe that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is the last and final messenger, that is not enough. You have to also do all these things, because that is part of Islam. It is not optional. So we know that whoever believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will eventually enter into Jannah, meaning that they will eventually get to Jannah once they have been punished for all their wrongdoings. So eventually they will enter into Jannah. That is one guarantee that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given. That if you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, you do not associate partners with Him, and you believe in Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, eventually you will enter into paradise. So what do we need to do to gain the closeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be from amongst those who enter into paradise, from the first to enter, from amongst the first to enter into paradise? So first and foremost, we try and seek knowledge. If we were to seek knowledge, then we would understand the actions and the things that we need to do that bring about the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we begin with salah, which is something we do regularly. So first and foremost, you have your 5 salawat that you have to perform. You have your Fajr, your Dhuhr, your Asr, Maghrib and Isha Salah. After you have performed those salawat, then you try your best to make sure you complete your sunan and your nawafil that come with those salah or with those salawat. And after that, you try and engage in extra nafil salah for the pleasure and for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you just make intention and you perform, even if it's just 2 rakat nafil salah regularly for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because in a hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, one of the most beloved actions to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one that is done regularly, no matter how small it may be. So you try and make the habit of performing 2 rakat nafil salah every day. You can start off with maybe 2 rakat nafil salah every week. Then you move on to twice or thrice a week. Eventually you'll get to the point where you can read it daily. You pick a time that is suitable for yourself as long as it doesn't come within the times that are prohibited, and you perform these extra rak'at, and you will gain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the same way, we move on to the next thing, which is fasting. We know that we have to fast in the month of Ramadan. There is no option, there is no 2 ways about it. If you can't fast because of your health, then you give the amount of kafara that you have to give. So when we fast in the month of Ramadan, then we try and fast extra. This is to gain the pleasure and the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because I mentioned earlier that fasting in the month of Ramadan, performing your daily salawat, this is the bare minimum. This is your responsibility as a Muslim. So everything extra that you do, this is to gain closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when it comes to fasting, you fast in the month of Ramadan, and beyond that you try and fast. For example, you have the 6 fasts of Shawwal. Beyond that you try and fast on the Mondays and Thursdays, Yawmul Ithnain and Khamis. So that is from the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I understand that now during the summertime it is difficult, the days are very long, but you get into the habit, in a few months' time you will be fasting for less than 12 hours. This is something that is easily achievable, and you can do it. So you fast on Mondays, you fast on Thursdays. Why? Because you want to gain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And beyond that, you can try and fast the 13th, 14th and 15th, Ayyamul Bid, which is the middle of the month. These are all actions that you can do to gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one who can grant us entry into paradise. Because we have to remember that we are not gaining entry into paradise because of our actions, but we only gain entry into paradise because of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how do we get this mercy and this love, this pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? By going above and beyond what we are supposed to do. So we are doing everything that we can to stand out technically to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we know of the hadith that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says that my followers, they will come forward on the day of judgment with their faces and their hands beaming with nur. Why? Because of the wudu. So you try and perform your wudu, and you try and stay in a constant state of wudu. Why? Because this is a form of protection from evil, from bad deeds. You have your wudu, you will constantly remember that I need to perform salah, I need to do this. When you don't have wudu, the laziness kicks in. Shaitan will come to you and say, look, you need to make wudu. Why don't you just make your wudu one time and you can read Dhuhr and Asr together? Or make your wudu later, you can read Maghrib and Isha together. So you just make wudu once. It's cold, you don't want to make wudu twice. So if you stay in the constant state of cleanliness and you have wudu, at any moment, the moment salah time kicks in, you have to stand up, you come to the masjid, or you pray wherever you are. So there is no delays, there is nothing to distract you, there is nothing that you need to do extra that will take you away from completing this responsibility that you have to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And at the same time, you try and you ponder on the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you look around you at everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost has granted you. Everything that you have is from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, subhanAllah, if we look around with the way technology is moving forward, you have everything going on with the artificial intelligence where they can imitate such and such a person's voice, and then you think about how they create this and they create that. You suddenly seem to forget that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything. No matter how far technology goes, no matter what they manage to make and create, it does not come close to the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing compares to the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you look to the skies, how is the sky up there? You don't see any beams, you don't see any pillars, any poles holding the sky up. This is the beauty of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The system, the ecosystem that we have, the animals, the specific roles that they have, including the insects that we might find annoying, they all have specific duties and roles that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them. And these responsibilities Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put upon them. So we need to ponder upon it, think hard that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given every single thing, every single creation a responsibility, including the ant and the fly. So what is our responsibility to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What do we have to do as Muslimin to gain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So when I say all this, it suddenly seems like, I have to constantly be in the worship, I have to constantly be engaged in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I have to constantly be remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whenever I'm free, I need to sit, do istighfar. You can, but there are other ways to go about it. Build it into your daily life. So when you're traveling, when you're walking, when you're conducting your business, it is second nature for you to do it according to the commands and teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you follow the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So for you to be honest, when you are dealing with someone, it shouldn't be something that you have to think about. It's not something that you have to force yourself to do. It should be second nature. So when someone comes to you and says, I want to buy this, it's second nature for you to just give them the right price with whatever profit you may be making, and you conduct your business. You don't need to think that, I can charge him triple, quadruple, 5, 10 times the price. I can sell him a fake. No, immediate thing should be that I'll be honest, I'll do my business and finished. So you don't need to take any extra effort to follow the teachings and the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because it is part of your nature. It is within your character and your conduct. So, same goes for when you're walking. When you're walking on the road, you're walking according to the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You do not walk with pride. You do not walk with haughtiness. You walk in a manner that is acceptable for a Muslim. When you see something on the road, something that might cause harm to someone else, you do your best to move it to the side. So if you're walking and you see some glass or something on the side, you push it to the side with your shoes. Why? Because you are removing an obstruction from someone else's path, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you for it. So when you live your life according to the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, you will be rewarded for it. So even though it's second nature for you and you might not think twice about doing something right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows this. The angels that are recording your deeds, they know this and they record it as a good deed for you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will have a special reward for you on the Day of Judgment. So you might forget about the actions that you have done. You might think of something as normal. But if it's according to the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and according to the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, you will be rewarded for it. And this is how you gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is how you gain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have to understand that when it comes to all our actions, we have to be calculated about them. We have to think that how is this benefiting me when it comes to my akhirah? When it comes to my actions, how does this specific thing benefit me? So when you're sitting and talking to someone, how is that benefiting you? If you're sitting and talking with a friend and this friend and you both have good conduct and you don't go into maybe backbiting, you don't go into cheating, you don't go into slandering someone, you're sitting and you're talking to someone and that's fine. Why? Because you're sitting, you're having a conversation, you're socializing and that's it. So there's no harm involved and you are maintaining brotherhood between two brothers, for example. So this is something you would do on a normal occasion and you will be rewarded for it. But for you, you're just having a good time with your friends. So you have to understand that following the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and establishing it from a young age is very important, because those things become second nature and you don't think about your actions then. And then being a good person is part of who you are. You don't need to change yourself to follow the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You should try and ingrain it within yourself that when you do certain actions, they are according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So you don't need to second guess, you don't need to doubt, you don't need to think that, oh, for me to follow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to follow the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, I have to go above and beyond what I do. I have to do this and I have to do that. No. It should be part of your nature, it should be part of your character. And how do you do it? You build it slowly. You start off slowly. The way you talk every day. So think, when I'm speaking to someone, am I respectful? Do I make jokes? And do I become popular at the expense of someone else? When you speak, are you taking the mic, or are you making fun of someone? To make your friends laugh, are you making fun of someone else? Think of those things. When you speak, do you speak in a manner where you might be approachable, where someone would think that this brother, I can come to him, I can speak to him. He seems like someone who can help me. Or do you come across as someone who's like, I don't want to go close to him. He might say something to me. Same goes for your language. Are you using bad language? Are you using language that you would normally, I give you one example. The way you speak with your friends, is that the same way you would speak with your parents, for example? Or is that the same way you would speak with your teachers or with an imam of the masjid, for example? So you think of it that way, and then you'll understand that maybe I need to correct my speech. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you the ability to speak. He has given you beautiful speech. Speak correctly. You don't need to imitate such and such a person. Speak correctly. You don't need to speak slang. You don't need to speak in a manner where you're using few words and you're getting your point across. Why? Because you're protecting yourself from causing any harm or damage to yourself. The more you speak, the more chances there are for you to say something wrong or to say something that would offend someone. So you think carefully that what am I going to say? Is it going to benefit people? Is it going to make someone laugh? If it doesn't go according to the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, go ahead. But if you feel like it's going to harm someone, it's going to make you look bad, it's going to bring bad deeds, or it's going to make you have bad results to it, then just be quiet. You don't need to say it. You won't be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for being popular. Yeah? You will be rewarded for bringing a smile onto your brothers, but that's if you do it according to the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So my respected elders, brothers, mothers and sisters in Islam, try your best to do everything extra that you can to gain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because that is the road or the path that you use to gain the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because as Muslimin, as I mentioned earlier, we all have to perform our salah. There is nothing extra you are doing if you're performing your salah. Same goes for if you're fasting in the month of Ramadan, if you're giving your zakah, if you have the ability and you go for hajj. This is something that every single Muslim has to do. It's a responsibility that they've been granted by Allah, that they have been placed upon by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they have to fulfill it. And every single person will be questioned upon it. If you want to stand out and you want to gain the pleasure and love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do anything extra that you can. Because that is what will help you stand out and gain the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the ability to do things that bring about the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to make us from amongst those who achieve the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ameen wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina.